Hi ho ho and welcome to BTmini. I'm not sure what exactly I'm going to call this, but I'm going to be trying something a little bit new this week, born out of necessity more than anything. I'm the only one here, just me, Jerry, doing the podcast by myself today. Uh, Everyone else was either busy or their internet was down. So we could take a week off. But, I figured, hey, I do want to talk about these African movies that I saw. And I suppose if we want to get more specific, they're both Senegalese, which I did not know going in, but they both are made in Senegal. I think, in fact, both of them are, they at least take place in the same city of Dakar, which is Senegal's capital. But both of those movies are Black Girl and Touki Bouki. I would say two pretty well known African movies, both produced around the same time. I think Black Girl is late 60s and Touki Bouki is early 70s. And I want to say they kind of have similar themes, but it is kind of difficult to ascertain what Touki Bouki is kind of about, and we'll get into why that is when we get to it. But I think we'll start off with Black Girl, just because that one has a more straightforward narrative, and it's easier to kind of pick apart all of the details and all of the interesting things that Black Girl does. I'm going to be pretty straightforward. I really, really liked Black Girl. I thought it was a really, really well done movie, especially since this is the first dive into African cinema that I have done. I think I have seen, I think it's Z, which I think is Algerian. But that one's like all sorts of confusing because it's like Algerian, but there's like a French production company and it takes place in Greece. So it isn't like totally about like what it's like in Algeria or anything. It's mostly like kind of a biopic about political corruption in Greece. But Black Girl and Touki Bouki both take place in Senegal. They have themes of post colonialism, or at least the legacy of colonialism. And, that was specifically to Senegal, that would be French colonialization, which, I mean, if we want to get into that, I suppose we can. It won't have to go super in depth about it, but I think, it being a post colonial nation after kind of World War II, you got all of these European nations in the 50s and 60s kind of realizing, oh, maybe this whole imperialism thing, maybe it's not as fashionable as it used to be. We'll do it in a different way, because there was a lot of independent movements, or independence movements arising in a lot of colonized nations all over the world. So you see a lot of nations gaining their independence around this time, but the Europeans, I guess, had one last trick up their sleeves. And I'm not sure if this is specifically to Senegal. I don't know specifically their history, but generally what would happen is that the European nations would basically acquiesce and be like, okay, fine, you guys want your independence so bad, I guess you can have it, but we're basically going to gut your infrastructure. We're going to take away all of the kind of systems of governance that we have put in place, and we're going to take those with us. And so basically these, indigenous people were given this nation and land to rule over, but we're not given the means to do so. So that's why there's a lot of like civil war, a lot of civil unrest, a lot of violence takes place after the European nations pull out. And so, of course, then the European nations can flip that and be like, oh, look how backwards these either African or South Asian or whatever, how backwards these people are. It was so much better under our rule. So, let's give them a bone. We'll send them humanitarian aid, and we'll set up all sorts of different industrial branches and stuff out there. They'll have their iron mines in Australia or in Africa. They have their own stuff there, and they can basically get away with that. It's imperialism without imperialism in a way. And so this is kind of the place where these movies take place. It is right. I think Black Girl, I think it was released, 5 years after Senegal had gained its independence. So it's very, very fresh. Now I think, and I'm not entirely sure. I really should have done a whole deep dive on Senegalese history since both of these movies take place in Senegal. But I mean, it's kind of hard to say like the French weren't the worst. I think that's pretty easy to say that the French weren't the worst imperial power that came out of Europe. I mean, like Belgium existed, and that was just pure evil, and like is the scars of that can still be felt today, both literally and metaphorically. But I think the French were more sneaky about it. I know more about Algeria just because I did do some digging about that when we talked about Z. I don't remember when that was. Probably about 6 months ago now, maybe longer. I think it may have been a year ago. But so that's where it takes place. Won't really get into history stuff pretty much. But the story of Black Girl is pretty simple. Or I guess as simple as something like this can be. There's a lot of, I think it captures a lot of the ideas that Senegalese people were feeling around this time, about how both white people and more specifically the French are kind of like distinct and upper class. And this does come up in Touki Bouki too, where the main character in Black Girl is I don't remember her name, but she is hired as the nanny to a white family in Dakar in Senegal. And she is basically invited by that white family to come back with them to Paris because they are going to be moving back there, and they like her so much that, they'll take her with them. And, she obviously jumps at that opportunity. She lives in kind of a slum or lower income area in Dakar. And so, she is kind of lured in by the promises of like, oh, well, we'll be able to walk the streets in Paris, and like on your days off, I'll take you down and we'll go shopping, and you'll buy such beautiful dresses, and like it'll just be like a fantastic time. And when she gets there, it turns out that she was not the nanny, but basically she was, I guess, just the entire like help, as it were, where like she was the cook and the nanny and the maid and like she doesn't really know how to cook, and like she knows how to clean, but like that's not what she signed up for. And so like over the course of the movie, she becomes more and more disillusioned with this, with the promises that this white family had promised her basically, and she just becomes more and more isolated and more shut off. She basically kind of has like a nervous breakdown at the end. And yeah, so I guess that's kind of just the general plot of Black Girl. It's a short movie. I think it's 60 minutes. So, in and out before you realize it. But the way that this movie kind of captures that feeling of isolation, which is not. I want to say it's like not a unique thing, but it's also like I don't know. I really maybe. I need to think about this some more. It's a movie that like kind of demands a lot of thought, because it is so dense for being an hour long. It has a lot of emotion in it, and it has a lot of, I guess, historical context, which I don't entirely know, but I mean, I know the general history. But I think one of the more like powerful motifs in this movie is there's this mask. And this is like, not unique at all. Like everybody who talks about this movie brings up the mask because, I mean, it is the most pointed, I guess, criticism of, I guess, white attitudes towards, I want to say Senegalese culture, but also I think it can be broadened out to African culture at large. And there are things in the movie that kind of do that too, because basically, when the maid, I guess I'll call her, gets hired to this white family, she brings like this traditional African mask that she buys off of one of the street boys that was walking around her neighborhood. And she brings it to them, and it's obviously very important to her. It's a marker of her culture, and she is gifting it to this family as thanks for providing her, I guess, a job and means to maybe get out of that low income area. And what does that white family do? Well, they just put it on the wall. Like it doesn't really mean anything to them. It's just a cool art piece to have on the wall. It's a decoration. And it doesn't seem to mean the same things to them that it means to her. And that is kind of representational of how, like, white people view, or at least this family, the family that is depicted here views her because, like, they bring her to France and, it's like, okay, well, we'll be able to go shopping and we'll have all these great times, and you'll be able to see the sights, you'll be able to see the great French countryside, all this stuff, and they just bring her there, and she's basically just kind of like decoration for the friends. There are friends that come over and they make her cook rice, and they're like, yeah, everybody in Senegal just eats rice, and she says, before before I came here, I never even had rice. And like now they're making me cook it with like this spice that I'm not familiar with. And then, the European friends are like, wow, this is really spicy. And then the family's like, oh yeah, all they eat is spicy rice. Like that's the culture down there. And it's just like, well, okay, that's not true. This is an overgeneralization, which is actually something I had to look up because I was like, it's kind of interesting how rice it's in like South American cuisine, it's in African cuisine, and it's in Asian cuisine. And I'm like, did it start in like Asia and then just got like traded? Because like it feels like, well, no, Africa would be the oldest civilization, but it feels like, China would be the one to like domesticate it and then spread it out through like the Silk Road or whatever. But it turns out it was independently domesticated in all three of those places, which I thought was kind of interesting. It's like one of the only crops to have been independently domesticated in three different continents, which is kind of cool and interesting. Well, at least to me. I don't know if it is to anyone else. um, but yeah, so that mask is obviously representational of the white family's views of her and I guess African culture at large, where it is like, oh, well, it is an African mask and this is African cuisine. And it's like, that's not really the case, at least in Senegal, you know? So yeah, I just thought that was really, really well done. And towards the end, while she's having her like mental breakdown, she like basically takes the mask off the wall and she's like, it is mine. You can't have it. And like the wife of the family like tries to take it from her and like they kind of fight over it. And she eventually takes it, but wow. Yeah, it's I'm just thinking about it now. It's like it's bringing up all sorts of emotions. It's such an emotionally dense movie. It really has kind of like a humanist perspective to it, and this is coming from a white guy. But it's just like I don't want to be like I have to be really careful about what I say here because I don't want to be just like another white guy talking about like black art and how like wow it really moved me, it changed all my opinions, but like I mean it really just kind of like reinforced like the I guess the legacy of colonialism and how at least this filmmaker felt about it. So if you can find a copy of it, I have the Criterion copy because there was a sale and I knew about this movie and I really wanted to watch it because I had never seen, well, unless you count, of course, Who Killed Captain Alex, the probably the best action movie ever made from Uganda. But I had never seen like I guess a professionally made African movie. So that one was the first one I saw, and then I saw Touki Bouki, which made me deeply, deeply, deeply uncomfortable because it did the Apocalypse Now thing and killed two animals and just filmed it. And I understand why. Like, I get the point of those scenes, but it made it very, very uncomfortable, and I did not know that those were coming. So I did want to say that in the beginning of this review, just like, hey, if you have, I'm not going to be talking about those scenes in depth, but I want to put out a warning where it's like, hey, if you maybe listen to this review and you want to check out this movie, just like know that that's coming because it completely took me off guard. Like the first scene in the movie is like a bunch of cow herders bringing in a herd of cattle to like a slaughterhouse, and then they take one of the cows into the slaughterhouse and they like tie it down, and then they slit the throat and there's like blood spurting everywhere and it's all real. And it's like, oh no, I don't want to see that. Like yuck. And there's like close-ups and stuff. Like it is really gross. But that is the kind of the catalyst for the story of this movie, which is it's going to be very easy to describe because not a lot happens. And that's kind of the weird thing because this is kind of like a surrealist. I'm not going to say experimental, but definitely leaning that direction, which I was not expecting at all. I knew next to nothing about this movie besides the title. And then I had seen the picture of the motorcycle that is on the cover of this movie. It's a motorcycle with like a cow's skull on the front, with like the horns pointed up. It's a cool design. I like it. But yeah, it is I guess the story of this is there are two people. It's like a young couple, and they want to escape to France because they also grew up in a kind of a low income slum of Senegal in Dakar, and they want to escape to France to make it big. They have these idealistic, I guess, impressions of what France is like, where it's like, well, it doesn't really matter what, like when we get there, like there's a scene where the girl was like, well, what are we gonna do when we get there? How are we gonna make money? And the guy's like, well, it doesn't really matter. We'll just get lucky. Kind of is like, well, yeah, France, land of prosperity, which, it's kind of funny as an American guy where it's like you hear that about America. I don't hear that about France a lot, but I guess to Senegal being a post-colonial French colony, that makes sense. And so they basically are just like, yeah, we'll make it big. They basically do some scams, steal some money, and I guess the big climax of the movie is that the woman makes it on the boat to France, but the man does not. So that is all that pretty much happens in the hour and a half that this movie takes place, if you're looking at it literally. But you could basically say the same about like any David Lynch movie, and be like, yeah, Eraserhead, it's about a dude and his girlfriend raising a weird baby, and that's all that happens. But like, obviously there's so much more that happens in that movie, than just the literal plot description. But I guess we'll talk a little bit about like, I was looking up some stuff about this and I had seen it described as animal cruelty. I don't completely agree with that description just because it's not, I mean, it's animal cruelty to like people who are like vegan or whatever. But like, this is just like, and I'm assuming that everybody talking about this is not vegan and it's just like, I don't like seeing cows get their throats slit. And it's like, well, that's just how that's made. Like, that's how it's done. And maybe that's coming from someone who, I'm from Iowa. I was not a farmer, but like I have known a lot of people who are farmers, and I know that it just kind of becomes a thing you do, where it's like I would never want to do that. And seeing it done on screen is obviously very disturbing to me, someone who has never killed a giant beast like that. But to the people who run this slaughterhouse, that's life. That's what you do. Which, still doesn't make it any better for me because I don't like seeing it, because it's pretty disturbing because, there's like, they bring this cow in and just the floor is covered with blood. and there's just like dead cow carcasses, and then they tie the cow down. You can just like tell it's scared, and they slit the throat. It's very like unceremonious. Which I brought up Apocalypse Now earlier, which is also a movie that kills a cow on screen. But if I remember right, and I'm not totally up to date on my Apocalypse Now trivia, I've only seen it once, and I think I may have seen like the extended version, which I've heard people say is actually the worst version. Like, it's very unnecessary what Coppola adds. So maybe I'll rewatch it and just watch the regular one, because I did not really like it the first time. So I think that probably has something to do with it. And yeah, I think what happens is that Coppola was shooting with, I believe, an actual indigenous group in Vietnam, and it was either they were actually going to kill this cow, and it was either going to be for some ceremony, or it was just going to be slaughtered. And so then they just filmed it. I think that's what happened. Like, it was just like, hey, this cow is going to be killed for something anyways. And then Coppola's like, okay, let's just shoot it. And so they filmed it, and it's in the movie. And I don't like seeing it there either, because, and I mean, actually, the one in Apocalypse Now is worse, because they're just like hacking at it with like machetes. At least in this one, in Touki Bouki, it's very cut and dry, and they just like go straight for the throat. They know exactly where to cut to kill it. But like, it's still really hard to watch. And there's another scene later in this movie where a goat gets killed, and very similarly, they kind of hold the goat down and slit its throat. But it's also like, that's what you do. If you're going to eat goat, then that's what you're gonna have to do. But yeah, it's just kind of hard to watch, especially because I thought I avoided it. Like, I saw that it was gonna happen, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna like look away for a second, because I don't want to watch it again. I don't need to see another animal bleed out in front of my eyes. But then they like intersperse that footage, like, while the guy in the relationship is getting like beat up by some local ruffians. It like intersperses like him getting beat up with the goat that he kills, I think. I actually don't know if it was him, because I looked away, but I'm assuming it was him. And so I couldn't really avoid it, and I'm like, stop showing. I don't want to see this. Like, stop. But so I was a little bit worried, because both of those probably happened in like the first 10 minutes of the movie, and I'm like, man, is it all gonna be like this? Like, do I need to like bunker down and prepare for watching animals die through the whole movie? Like, is that what this is gonna be? And that's really it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. But yeah, it's a real rough way to start a movie, especially for someone. I'm Here's the thing, because I'm not usually like kind of like weak stomached or whatever. Like, I can take gore and stuff in movies because it's all fake. Like, there's that disconnect for me where it's like, oh, well, I can watch like a dude get exploded, and like that's not going to bother me because it's fake. It's like CGI, or they just like filled up a dummy with meat and dynamite and just set it off, you know? So like, that's fine, because it's, but watching it like really happen, that was kind of rough. And I didn't like it in Apocalypse Now either. So yeah, I was like, oh man, this is, I was seriously debating like turning it off. So like, as like I paused it and I looked it up and it looked like it was only those two scenes. I'm like, okay, I'll bunker down and watch the rest. So I'm kind of glad I did. It's a really good movie, but it's also I don't know if I like totally liked it, but like this is a genre that is not my cup of tea, just in general. Like I brought up David Lynch earlier. David Lynch is the type of filmmaker that I would love to love. You know, I love the guy. He's such a weird dude. And I love like everything, like those weather updates and every interview I've seen with him. He's just so weird, and I love that. But yeah, man, I'm just not a fan of his movies. I think like I've seen Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, The Straight Story, Fire Walk with Me, and then Twin Peaks, all three seasons. And I think that my favorite stuff of his is the Twin Peaks stuff. I think Fire Walk with Me is fantastic. But like I was not a fan of Eraserhead at all. Not really a fan of Mulholland Drive at all. I was kind of I was okay on The Straight Story just because that was not I mean it was a David Lynch movie, but it was not like what you think of a David Lynch movie. So I am not really a fan of like weirdo surrealist kind of artsy movies, and this movie is very much that. So yeah, so it was like that alongside the kind of cultural disconnect. I mean, it was in French. So, you know, I don't speak that language. There's also like a lot of I'm assuming like stuff that is specific to Senegalese culture in it, which I obviously don't know. I am not Senegalese, obviously. So yeah, there was just like a lot of those kind of disconnects with it. But it's a very, very well done movie. I'm glad that the work had been done to preserve it because it's kind of my understanding that this one and Black Girl were almost like kind of lost. It took some like serious film preservation work in, I think, the 90s and 2000s to kind of bring them back. I think Black Girl specifically, like Criterion release of it, like started with like a bunch of like a big forward about like all of the work that went into preserving it because like it won like some awards when it came out, but like it was like it won in like the Black Arts Festival because like when that movie came out, like you know, it was just it's obviously very, very different to how the kind of film landscape is today. Obviously, you know, like John Dielman, the feminist movie would not even be considered like for being like one of the best movies of all time, according to that Sight and Sound poll that came out last year. Was it last? Yeah, it was last year. So yeah, just very, very different. It won like some awards and like kind of smaller festivals, and then it kind of was forgotten. So I think Touki Bouki kind of the same deal. I will say that Touki Bouki, I also have the Criterion release of this one. The it looks worse than the Black Girl one. I don't know. There just might be some stuff that's the quality is just lost because of how it was stored. But yeah, I mean, this isn't a dig at it at all, but it's like it's in 4:3 and it's kind of grainy, which you know could be due to like how the like what cameras they had available, stuff like that. But yeah, so I don't know. There's just a lot of kind of like disconnects with it. This might be one where I revisit it in like I don't know, a couple years or even longer, where it's like, wow, this is something really special. right now I can recognize it as a really, really well done movie. I think the coolest part for me was seeing all of the like, I mean, like historic downtown Dakar. Like, it's a beautiful town. Like, and even like when they were going through like the lower income places, and this is also something that Black Girl does too, where like I love how like scrappy it is, where I don't want to say it, well, maybe, but like you can tell that like they like film crowds, and like you can tell they aren't like extras or anything. Like they just like sat the camera down and filmed a crowd, and like people are like looking at the camera, and like some people are like ignoring it, but like even the people who are ignoring it like glance at the camera and they're like, whatever, and they just get on with their day. But there's just like people straight up just kind of staring at the camera being like, okay, what's going on? Which I love. Like I that's what I love about, and I'm like unironically a really, really big fan of Who Killed Captain Alex. Like beyond it being like a haha movie to watch with your friends, like it is genuinely a really, really impressive achievement in like filmmaking. And I have like such deep admiration and respect for the Walk Hollywood people, which kind of, it sounds funny based on like what they make, but like, you know, you read about like what conditions they have to like film, and this is today. This isn't 60 years ago, where like Isaac Mbwana, I believe is how you pronounce the last name there. You know, he is like this director in Wakaliga, Uganda, which is a slum of the capital, which is Kampala. And, you know, he basically just like gets the town together and they make these movies. And, you know, he has like this hand me down computer that he had to like make out of like scrap from all of these other computers. And he like only has enough hard drive space for one movie. So he edits his movie on this computer and then he like exports it out to a DVD and then has to delete everything, which is like such a shame, which is why Who Killed Captain Alex, like, you know, the only version we have is one that has a VJ on it, which is something very specific to, I don't know if it's specific to Uganda. It might be something more generally in Central Africa. But for those who don't know, a VJ stands for Video Joker, which is basically, I don't know if it's like a radio personality. He kind of sounds like it, the guy who's on it. But, you know, you buy your DVDs from these like VJ stores, which sounds gross saying it. It sounds like something else. But, you know, you would get your DVDs and then there would be like a commentary track over the movie that you bought, which is like the guy who was running the store, just like, you know, in his house recording lines and just like making jokes through the movie. And so Who Killed Captain Alex, the only copy of it available is the one that has the VJ on it, because that was the one copy they could find. So it's it's kind of, so you think of those conditions, and obviously they're it's really scrappy there too, because it's like we're not actors, we're just people who live in this slum in Kampala, Uganda, and we're all just gonna get together and make it like a fun action movie together. And it's so much fun, like, and the action in it is, it's like not realistic, but it's just so fun. It's like infectious how, like, how much fun they were having bleeds through the screen, and it just like you start feeling how much fun they were having, and it's like, man, this is like it's just so much fun. It's hard to describe it any other way. Like seriously, if you've not seen Who Killed Captain Alex, it's free on YouTube. Maybe get some people together and watch it. Like it is one of the surefire hits of like if you have like fun movie nights, which our friend group does. So that one is fantastic, and it's one of the rare ones that we show in those types of movie nights that's like, this is just, it's like so pure, like a lot of like schlocky B movies have like just the worst intentions. And like we were kind of getting into this in like the horror marathon that we just finished up, where like Friday the 13th, like it started out and it was just like, okay, let's just do Halloween, but we'll have nudity in it because that's what'll get teenagers in the theater. And there's just like such a like gross and rotten feel to some of these B movies made around that time. And it's like, yeah, they're fun. Like they can be funny, but like you can tell there's just like that little cynic edge to it where it's like there's some, they're trying to get on this trend or they're trying to do that. And like Who Killed Captain Alex is its own thing, and it's just a bunch of people getting together to make a movie together, and it's so much fun. So that one's great. Sorry to go on a little rant about that in this Black Girl and Touki Bouki discussion, but honestly, I don't have much to say about Touki Bouki because it didn't really do a whole lot for me, and I will be honest, completely honest, that these last couple of days have been like so brutal at work, and like I sat down to watch that movie today and it was totally the wrong atmosphere. And we have that sometimes where it's like, and that's partially my fault, where it's like I want to have like a couple movies per week to talk about because I think that it fills up enough time. Obviously, like I'm going to be able to put out like a little mini podcast of just this. But it's also like my work as like I'm a mailman. It's so like it's so fluid like how much I'm going to have in a day, where it's like yesterday I worked 12 hours and then today I worked 6. So I'm like completely exhausted, and I sat down earlier today to watch this and I'm still really tired. So, you know, definitely not the right headspace, but also even if I was in the right headspace, I don't think this is really my type of movie. So, I say that like I'm probably going to rate this on Letterboxd pretty low because I tend to rate things on Letterboxd based on personal enjoyment, but I do want to say and at least put it out in some capacity that like this movie is very very good. It's just that I didn't like it, which I think is a very interesting like concept where like I feel like a lot of people will equate how good a movie is to how much they liked it, and certainly I have fallen into that trap myself. But I think with this one, it's in a unique position where I recognize how really fantastic it is under the circumstances that they were in, and to make something that I described to a David Lynch movie, which, you know, is its own breed. It's very impressive, the things that he's able to pull off too. But I don't really like those either. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those movies where it's like, I think if you're going to like, if you're trying to get into movies like seriously, like you're wanting to be like I don't want to say like a cinephile or anything. There are like so many of these like terms for film fans or so have like negative connotations. Like cinephile is too artsy or whatever. Film bro, don't like them either. But if you're trying to take, film more seriously as like an art form and you're trying to expand your your horizons a little bit of like where you're taking your movies from, because like I feel like as an American I obviously get most of my movies from like big American studios or even smaller American studios, because that's what plays here. But I think I'm gonna really try to make an effort next year, especially of you know trying to get some movies from Latin America. There's a lot there, like blind spots. I know there's a lot of Mexican filmmakers right now making all sorts of interesting things, which I have seen, I think, next to nothing. I think I saw half of Roma a couple years ago, but didn't finish it. So yeah, really, I think the only Mexican filmmaker I am somewhat familiar with is Guillermo del Toro, but like I don't know. I don't know. He makes like big Hollywood movies these days, which is not a bad thing because I like all of them. But like, there's a lot of like, kind of under the radar Mexican filmmakers that I feel like I need to see. And also, there's a lot of, I guess, Asian films that I'm not like super familiar with. Obviously, I've seen a lot of like Korean and Japanese and Indian movies, but like Iran has a very big, or I don't know. I don't know about very big, but they do have a sizable film presence, and I have not seen any of their stuff. I have also heard that their stuff can be a little bit out there, which, as I have stated, is maybe not my thing, but I do want to try. So, next year, or maybe even the end of this year. I don't know. I don't have any sort of schedule for what these next weeks are going to be. I'm going to try to keep it that way. Even though I loved doing this Halloween marathon, it was so much fun. I loved watching all these horror movies. I'm going to try to, go back to a little bit of unscheduled stuff. I don't like holding myself. I like, having a schedule and doing that. But also, I want to be able to be free for a little bit to watch what I want to watch. And I do have some ideas for like triple feature stuff coming up. So if I get to a place where I have time, which I might not, because as I said, mailman, getting into the Christmas rush. So, in between Thanksgiving and Christmas is going to be very hectic for me. I might have to cut back to like one movie a week. Which, might not be so bad. Maybe I'll do something a little more like ambitious and like pick something that really I'll do like a deep dive on. So that might be fun. We'll see what that's going to hold. But I think that'll do it for this Boy Time Mini. I don't think done one of these in a while. I think the last time I did a solo podcast was when I watched Doctor Strange 2, which I think was technically this year. I think. Wasn't it like February? I don't know who I'm asking. Usually I have Babby here to answer my questions, but not today. But yeah, so next week I do have, we're going to talk about, I was going to talk about Spider-Man 2. I'm not going to do that in this mini one. I'll save it for next week. We also are probably going to talk about SAG-AFTRA. That strike is finally over. So all of the major strikes in Hollywood are officially over, which is great. I'm glad everybody's getting their what they wanted. Sounds like there's some AI protections, which I know is the big sticking point for these unions, which is good. Obviously, you know our stances on all of that if you've listened to the main podcast. And I don't know if we're going to talk about the Game Awards. We'll probably talk about the Grammys, even though I don't know who really cares about the Grammys. But yeah, we'll see. It's award season. You know, it's going to be great. Well, I don't know about great, but it will be something. But I think that'll do it for this little boy time mini. You know, if you like this stuff, if you like these solo podcasts, you know, maybe let me know. I can see. I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to do these solo just because it is a little weird talking to nobody. But I guess a podcast is always kind of that. But, whatever. Bye.